It has been almost 3 years that I've been trying to make this video about iris. Iris is probably my favorite note in perfumery, and that's why it has been so difficult, because I've tried so many iris perfumes and I wanted to put a very well organized, very well presented video for you. But I decided that if I target that, I probably will never make this video, so please consider this as a work in progress or maybe the first part of my video. I have some irises in here, and I wonder if you have ever smelled these irises. Because if I found a perfume that smells exactly like this iris flower, this would be the perfect scent for me. Unfortunately, I have not found one yet. So if you have any recommendations, please comment below. A lot of people think that it's very nice to have maximum of natural ingredients in your fragrance. But when it comes to iris, it's not so obvious, because iris flowers are actually not used as a natural material. Perfumeries use what is called orris butter or iris pallida concrete. The extraction of this orris butter from the root is very complicated, and that's what makes orris butter very expensive. When you say that you want natural iris in your fragrance, do you actually know how this iris butter smells? Let's see if I can make you imagine the smell of orris butter. Take some black earth, take some baking flour, mix it very well with butter, add the scent of human skin and a big roll of hay. The floral element is actually really weak and it has a bit of a vintage vibe. So in the concentrated form, orris butter is actually not so pleasant as an aroma, but I see how it creates beautiful compositions and how it's made to imitate earthiness and powderiness and human skin at the same time. And it's not for nothing that it is one of the most expensive ingredients in the world. They actually call it blue gold in perfumeries, because the prices can go up to $100,000 per kilo. If you would like to smell the real orris butter, you should come visit me in France, because I make these flower tours where we go see how irises are grown and where you will have a chance to smell some natural ingredients, including iris pallida concrete. The elements that are called irons that imitate the smell of orris butter were invented already at the end of the 19th century and were widely used by perfumeries throughout the 20th century. Most fragrances today do not use natural materials. They imitate either iris flower or orris or something that is very far from iris completely. The thing is that we never know the concentration of the natural product, and we don't know if it's a natural product or not. There is no transparency when it comes to ingredients and to the use of raw materials. I personally don't really care if the fragrance is made from natural ingredients or from chemical substitutes. What matters for me when it comes to perfumes is how it smells, if I like it or I don't like it. So in this video, I will be talking about different kind of iris fragrances, regardless of their natural or synthetic composition. But to give a tribute to the actual orris butter, I'm gonna start with a category of fragrances that contains real orris butter. One of the fragrances that is known as the etalon of iris fragrances in perfumeries is called Chanel 19. This fragrance is very highly rated and very appreciated by the specialists. I am personally not a big fan of most Chanel fragrances because of their aldehyde DNA, but I find Chanel 19 still very interesting as a composition. On one side, we have this element that smells very similar to orris butter, and on the other side, we have this green garden, green grass element with aldehydes. So if you can separate the two, you can get the idea of the smell of orris butter. Altogether, the combination is light, transparent, not really buttery. It has no sweetness, it smells very natural, And then there is this vintage aura that comes both from the aldehyde side and the orris butter side at the same time. As I said, I'm not a big fan of this fragrance, but I still do have a lot of respect for it just as a composition. In fact, Chanel has many fragrances with iris as a note. In most cases, I find iris a bit lost behind other notes, especially behind this aldehyde DNA of Chanel. The oldest iris fragrance that contains real orris butter is by the brand called Santa Maria Novella. The formula of the fragrance was developed in 1901. I think that's the oldest iris fragrance that I know. Santa Maria Novella was a small production in Florence, was a small boutique, almost like a pharmacy. And I visited that boutique just before COVID and I smelled their iris. I remember the fragrance was pretty heavy, and I thought it's done in a very old traditional ways. So I did not think it would be something wearable for me. But I put it on a blotter and I put it in my bag. And I remember taking out that blotter the day after and thinking that actually it was a really, really beautiful smell. And now I sort of regret not purchasing that fragrance, at least a little sample of it or something, because in 2020 Santa Maria Novella was purchased by a big investor, and of course everything was reshuffled, everything was reoriented towards bigger business. So they came up with a new fragrance that is called L'Iris with L at the beginning, and this one is a totally new formula with ambroxan, of course, and it does not smell the same way anymore. The next fragrance that is known as one of the most respected fragrances featuring iris is called L'Heure Bleue by Guerlain. The fragrance is over 100 years old, and I've heard that some of the members of the royal family of England wear this fragrance. I think the modern tastes have really evolved, and L'Heure Bleue kind of stayed in the past. It's something that is very difficult to wear for modern women. Very often, iris pallida can be found in the compositions that modern noses would describe as outdated, especially those people who were born after the 80s. I was always thinking that this old-fashioned aura is created mostly by the combination of orange blossom and amber. Later, I found out that some flowers can also contribute to these scents that were mostly created in the 80s, especially ylang ylang and carnations. But then I realized that iris pallida also contributes to that old-fashioned aura. And that's when I tried iris extract from the collection L'Art et la Matière by Guerlain. This collection has a concentration of at least 30%. And here we have iris pallida. When I smelled it on a blotter, I thought, this is it. This is the ultimate scent for me. But when I was wearing it close to my skin, close to my nose, when it was changing during the day, and it was really, really long lasting, I realized that there is something old-fashioned about it. I wouldn't say that it smells like an old lady, but there is something that reminds me of those perfumes in the 80s. I am still pretty crazy about this highly concentrated iris pallida by Guerlain, but I realized that I need to dilute it to lighten it with something else. But this is a totally different story. So if you want to know the real smell of iris pallida and you want your iris to be very long lasting, especially to have iris as a base, be ready to pay the price. Because 30 ml of this fragrance is about $500, I think. And the last fragrance that I would like to mention in the category Natural Orris fragrances is called Iris 39 by Le Labo. The fragrance has been discontinued, and frankly speaking, I see why it was not so popular. There were definitely some fans of this fragrance, but it is not a mass appealing fragrance. It is a very difficult fragrance to wear. I remember I came to a shop and I just took a bottle and I sprayed it on myself, thinking that I enjoy most iris fragrances and normally they are quite light, so I couldn't see any danger. And I was just knocked out with one spray. The fragrance is very dense, very intense, and certainly is not a safe blind buy. Don't think about blind buying it unless you're buying a sample. So when I sprayed it, I still tried to think what kind of iris it was. And for me, I distinguish two different parts. On one side, I have this orris butter that is very raw, does not try to seduce you, does not try to be rounded or pleasant. It's more vegetal, cold, and that's the part I actually like, but unfortunately it's about 10% of the fragrance maybe. The other 90% is the part I did not like. What we find in here is heavy animalic musk that is also very soapy. And then there's a lot of patchouli. So this part actually dominates the fragrance, and I find it to be unpleasant. And that's the part that makes the fragrance very strong, and that's the part that really dominates over iris and doesn't really let that iris come out in its beauty. Later I smelled the blotter in my purse and I thought that the sillage of this fragrance might smell nice, but I just couldn't wear it. Many fragrances that contain natural orris butter sound a little bit like they are coming from a different era. And many women today do not find these fragrances wearable. They label them as old lady or vintage. From here, I would like to transition into a category of iris fragrances with vintage vibe. They might have real orris butter or they may not. A fragrance that is very special on a shelf of Iris perfumes is by Frederic Malle called Iris Poudre. You probably have heard about it many times because I think every blogger speaks about it. The thing is that this is a very complex fragrance with a big soup of notes. That's how I usually call fragrances of the 80s that have all these notes at the same time. The good thing is that iris is not lost in here. The perfume is all about iris. Other notes are in here, yes. And once again, I think it's mostly other notes that make this fragrance old-fashioned. And to me, this is too much old-fashioned. The perfumer says that they add aldehydes to bring out the nature of the flowers. But I'm not a big fan of aldehydes, and they really disturb me. I'm sure people who were using perfumes in the 80s would really appreciate this creation because it does have a solid level of intensity and really a complexity that is very rare to find nowadays. When I say this outdated aura, I don't mean they're all the same. This aura could be just a little hint, maybe just a little reminder of the old times. Aperitivo Milanese by Trussardi. It doesn't sound vintage, we don't see that many notes in here, but there is something about this composition, and I'm not even sure it's about iris itself. It's once again, it's probably about neroli, orange blossom, amber, and maybe heliotrope, because heliotrope is also another flower that was very much used in the 80s. Nonetheless, I still find Aperitivo Milanese very interesting. I find it really balanced. It's a bit powdery, yet it has a serious side. There is some sweetness and florals. Iris is really beautifully done in here. And I think it could still be appreciated by a lot of people, but primarily those people who are probably above 35 or 40. Another iris perfume that I see as an attempt to lighten, to freshen, to remake the fragrances of the 80s is by Parfums de Marly, and it's called Athalia. It has very few notes. It has iris that sounds a bit outdated. An entire composition would probably remind you of your grandmother, but when I did my review of Parfums de Marly, I did get some comments from young girls who like Athalia, so it's just a matter of taste. This is a kind of iris that is so light and airy that it also has another downside of it, and it is a category of a fast disappearing iris. The fastest disappearing iris is by Versace called Iris Delete. The word iris should not even be put in the name of this fragrance. It should be called boring amber, because I think iris as a note was killed already in a bottle. So while you're spraying it, imagining iris in your head because of the name, when you put it on your skin, it's just amber. And that's a kind of amber I really dislike. So that's why it was also a very big disappointment for me. The next fragrance is a fragrance that everybody knows, and I think every blogger speaks about it, is called Infusions by Prada. Here I have a little miniature. The line Infusions came out in 2008. They had this fragrance that was called Iris. Then they added a few more fragrances to their collection, and they started calling them Infusion of something. So here we have Infusion d'Iris. On Fragrantica, they don't make a distinction between Infusion de Riz and Iris, but the formulas are different. Here I put the official notes for you. They say that the first version contained the real Oris butter, and as you see, the notes are slightly different. I am not sure when exactly they switched to the Infusion de Riz version. I did try the original Iris just a little bit before COVID. One here, and about 30 minutes later, I barely felt anything. This little bottle gives me a smell of iris when I just smell it like this. When I put it on my skin, I get iris, but very faint note of iris. And this is mostly a vegetal floral iris. The note that I feel the strongest in the new version is neroli. In the previous version, iris was more beautiful, more floral, more realistic iris, but it was really disappearing quickly, leaving you with practically nothing. Here you have a bit of a dry down that is mostly neroli, but dry kind of neroli, woody neroli supported by vetiver. A lot of people would call it a skin scent, but for me it's not, because iris actually works really well with the chemistry of my skin. It can become a second skin, but neroli doesn't. The main complaint about Infusion de Riz is that it disappears really quickly. And if you're a kind of person who likes intense radiating fragrances, I don't think you should even be going into this one. There's another perfume in the same collection that is called Infusion de Riz Cedre, and at least that one has a little bit of something 5-10 minutes later. I cannot really define it as cedarwood. It's a very generic, woody, musky, but at least there is something, while iris infusion really literally leaves nothing on my skin. Another fragrance that deserves to be mentioned in here is Infusion d'Homme. In fact, iris and Infusion d'Homme have exactly the same notes. I was thinking that Infusion d'Homme was a predecessor of iris, but according to Fragrantica, it looks like they came out around the same time. Unfortunately, I could not find Infusion d'Homme, but I did find the old iris formula. If you want, I would make a video comparing Infusion de Riz and iris side by side. Let me know if you're interested. If you are a fan of iris infusion, not because of iris but because of the composition overall, I would also recommend you try a fragrance from the brand called Essential Perfumes, Velvet Iris. The brand actually is relatively new, but they are already really well positioned on the market. They have been collaborating with a lot of famous perfumers, and Velvet Iris was also created by a perfumer who is already famous for several iris creations. When I sprayed Velvet Iris, I was just so amazed. I was like, this is floral and earthy and even powdery, but not powdery in a synthetic way. It's powdery in a way that Oris butter smells like. It's perfectly unisex and it has so many different beautiful accords at the opening. There's a bit of spiciness, and there's also a very interesting note that is called bouchou, a note that I found in Bal d'Afrique, but at that time I couldn't understand it. So finally I understood that note of bouchou that is also here at the opening. The thing is that this perfect iris of Velvet Iris is perfect, but maybe for 5-10 minutes. Then the fragrance turns into a disaster for me. The first little step towards disappointment is that the iris is practically gone and neroli is beginning to take over, and Velvet Iris is starting to remind me of Infusion de Riz by Prada, where neroli is actually pretty strong. And then I would think that this would develop somewhere into the base notes, into woodiness or leather. But you know what? It just did not develop anywhere on my skin. This neroli just started getting stronger and stronger and more annoying, and I had to wash it off. And even washing it off was so difficult because it was just so sticky. So when I say that Velvet Iris is like a stronger version of Iris Infusion, it's not the iris that is stronger in here, it's neroli that is stronger in here. And you definitely have to love that neroli to be able to wear Velvet Iris. Another perfume that I would like to mention in the category of the fast disappearing irises is by Molinard, and it's called Iris. Molinard is a perfumer from Grasse, It's not so much popular all over the world, but it definitely is known in France. So they have this fragrance that is just called simply Iris. And honestly, this is probably the smell that is the closest to the actual iris flower. Despite the notes, the fragrance is actually very simple, very beautiful. The only problem is it really does not stay. It does not even stick to your skin. The moment you spray it, you try to catch it, and it's already gone. Molinard has another fragrance that is called Iris Ardent, and it's coming from their Prestige collection. It's not a fast disappearing iris anymore. It's actually a fragrance that lasts on your skin. It can blend with your skin very nicely. The fragrance is actually quite simple. The only element that I did not like personally is the kind of modern amber that they use. The biggest category of iris fragrances would probably be skin scents. When I say a skin scent, I mean the smells that blend in very well with our skin to the point that they become our second skin. And of course, it's very difficult to define it because it's very subjective. For example, some of the fast disappearing irises could be skin scents as well. I want to try to place fragrances in this category depending on their intensity level. And the first category would be invisible fragrances. And most of these fragrances are those that contain ambroxan. The best example here would be Glossier. But the level of its intensity is so low that some people just don't feel it. Then some fragrances would have intensity a bit higher, climbing towards 2 and 3 out of 10, and some people would actually feel it. Especially, we would find a lot of fragrances here that contain rice and iris together. The best example would probably be White Rice by Danam. My favorite perfume in the category of skin irises would be Musk Noir by Trussardi. This one is probably my favorite smell out of a lot of iris fragrances that I know. It smells really clean, pure, crystallic. The reason I place Musk Noir in the category of skin fragrances is because its musk is very close to my natural skin smell. And I feel like Musk Noir just becomes my second skin. And despite my very big love for it, I don't think I would be purchasing it because I just don't feel it so much after 10-15 minutes of wearing it. The next subcategory of skin fragrances is what I call spicy and peppery iris perfumes. And this is not so obvious that they belong into skin category. In terms of intensity, spicy irises could be very different. They could be even in the category of invisible irises, fast disappearing irises, or they could be so intense when the spicy elements sort of suppress iris. I'll try to give you different examples that have different level of intensity here. When I started using peppery iris fragrances, I was a bit mad. I was like, why to take beautiful iris and to put a lot of pepper in it? Why to destroy that beautiful iris with pepper? And then when I started wearing them, I realized all together between the human pheromones, iris and pepper, it ends in some kind of harmonious, beautiful scent. So if you are skeptical about this combination of iris and pepper, try these fragrances on your skin. One of my favorite fragrances is Casanova 2161 by Valmont. Casanova sounds mostly like a mix of black pepper and iris. In fact, we have vetiver on the base. This one is very transparent, feels more like a musky fragrance. It's a kind of fragrance that you can just shower yourself with, which I do quite a lot every summer. It's just a very easy reach for both ladies and gentlemen. Another fragrance that unfortunately has been reformulated is by Ormonde Jayne and is called Isfarkand. This fragrance was not love at first sight, but I found myself to be totally addicted to it. I'm so drawn into it, it's just unbelievable. It opens up with a very realistic pink pepper, and then you're waiting for other notes to come out, and this fragrance is going from a very bright opening to a very quiet, intimate, close to skin fragrance. but it smells so amazing on my skin. I did not even think that I could like oak moss that much. This oak moss is very soft, it's like fluffy and woody, and it has a little citrusy touch. And that touch of iris, let me see if I can describe that one. I think that's the key why I'm so drawn into it. One of my favorite smells in nature is a smell of purple iris after the rain. It does not have very strong floral smell, but it smells like drops of rain. And these floral drops of rain are mixed with this citrusy and slightly spicy oak moss. That is just so beautiful. The only problem is performance. I had a feeling that this fragrance was just absorbed and killed by my skin, or it just went from opening directly to dry down. That dry down is just staying on skin, but it's just so amazing. I think if I smelled it on a man, this would be just instant sexual chemistry. This perfume is made for sex nights, because that's the time when you don't want very radiating loud fragrance, but you still want to have your skin smelling nice and mix with your pheromones. So I think if a man is wearing this fragrance and his skin chemistry is working well with it, it could be just wow. I have an old sample, and here we have iris and cedar in the heart of this composition. The thing is, I really am upset what they've done with Isfarkand. In fact, iris was making it the best sex scent, and iris is gone. The next fragrance I have in here is by a French brand that is called Glossier. I describe it as a spicy skin scent. When I smell it just like this, I really love it. But when I spray it, it has a lot of pink pepper, especially at the beginning. Sur tes lèvres means on your lips. And when we say skin fragrance, it sounds romantic. But think about the moment before you kiss the lips of your lover. It's like the skin and the breath and love and all that aura created in the scent with iris. And honestly, this was a blind buy for me just because of the description. Luckily, I have a format of 3.5 ml. I really appreciate that the brand has these mini formats. Glossier is very proud to provide transparency and traceability when it comes to the ingredients of their fragrances. They say that Sur tes lèvres is made from 100% natural ingredients from the LMR Naturals. LMR stands for Le Laboratoire Monique Rémy, and it belongs to the company International Flavors and Fragrances. As a scent, it's a very light floral that indeed sounds a bit more like an actual iris flower. I really enjoy how the scent smells. The fragrance is really transparent, and I could tell that it's dominated by ambroxan, despite that it's not even listed on Fragrantica. Actually, it's used a lot by the brand. But in the case of this fragrance, it actually is not disturbing, and it really does serve the purpose, making the fragrance floral, light, airy, yet long-lasting. So I think as a chemical formula, it's really perfect. And as a scent, it also is very beautiful. If we start increasing the level of spiciness and the level of intensity of spicy irises, they are no longer skin fragrances. And they are going more to the territory of woody fragrances and amber fragrances. One of my favorites in here is a fragrance by Van Cleef & Arpels that is called Bois d'Iris, Woods of Iris. You can already understand from the name that this one is a woody fragrance, in fact. At the beginning, I wanted to put this in the category of fast disappearing iris, because I thought that iris here is somewhere between the lines and just goes away very quickly. But after smelling the real orris butter, I realized that this fragrance just brings out the woody side of orris butter. And the best way to do it is vetiver. In fact, we find vetiver in many iris fragrances that try to imitate orris butter. Vetiver is also the reason why I decided to put Bois d'Iris in the category of spicy skin fragrances. Because very often vetiver is perceived like a note of black pepper. And this was the case for Casanova, by Valmont, and this is also the case for Bois d'Iris. The pyramid of the fragrance is very simple, but the reality is that it's very complex. There are many woody accords in here, and there's an interesting chemistry here that is created not only with a game of orris butter and vetiver, but also with a note of salt. Here it does not smell like a salty fragrance. The type of salt that we find in here I associate mostly with the natural smell of ambergris. Ambergris that we get in fragrances is very far from the smell of natural ambergris. The real ambergris, that is a vomit of a sperm whale, has that salty smell. Can you imagine picking up a rock on the beach and smelling it? Does it smell salty to you? This is a kind of salt that we find in ambergris, and this is a kind of salt that we find in here. For sure, there's no real ambergris in this fragrance. I really love that there's real orris butter in here. You just have to know what to expect from this fragrance and to be ready for its woody character. At the same time, this woody side of iris blends in beautifully with my skin. It doesn't have a strong projection, but yet it lasts about 3-4 hours on my skin. And another thing is, I think it's probably among my favorite fragrances for men. I really love smelling it on male skin. One of the most intense fragrances among spicy irises is Carolina Herrera, and it's called Iris Empire. This collection is really interesting. I like the DNA of it. It is mostly ambery, woody, spicy cinnamon, Christmas vibe, and Iris Empire is not an exception. I'm not sure that the fragrance deserves the name Iris. It probably is more of a patchouli dominant fragrance. If you're not a lover of patchouli, which generally I'm not as well, I still recommend you trying it because the creation is really interesting. It really is wearable. I love wearing it myself, especially around November and December. But I specifically like this fragrance on male skin. I think it's very, very sexy, very confident. Another spicy iris that I personally find absolutely magnificent is by the brand called Olfactive Studio. It's called Iris Shot. I have a series of flower shots, and Iris Shot is definitely a very special one. First of all, it is an extrait of parfum. And believe me, the price and the quality, you really are getting a great deal. As for the fragrance, I think they took very different parts of iris. They took the earthiness, the floral part, slightly powdery part, but it really is like earthy powdery, like real orris butter. Then they have added some other elements that are very good friends of iris when you have an attempt to create skin iris. I'm talking about pink pepper, almond, carrot seeds, and even vetiver. All this creates a skin scent, but it is intensified. And then this intensified skin scent is kind of volumized with aldehydes. Normally, I don't like aldehydes, and when I see them on the top, I know that this note is not going to be a fast disappearing note, that aldehydes are going to be in the core of the composition. It is the case in here, but somehow, because of other notes, these aldehydes do not disturb me. The element that is more dominant in here than the iris itself is cardamom. So this is really a fragrance that is made for cardamom lovers. And that's the reason I put it into the category of spicy irises. But iris is here, it goes beautifully in your skin, it projects well. The next category of iris fragrances is what I call synthetic powder. And the best example of it is one of the fragrances that comes from Kenzo Memories collection that is called Soleil Thé. If you look at the pyramid, you have iris in the center of the composition, but it is very far from iris or any idea of iris. Imagine Johnson & Johnson baby oil, baby powder, and Nivea cream. Blend them all together, and this is what you get. You might be imagining something solar that comes from the name of this fragrance, Soleil Thé, which means sunny tea. but it's very hard to catch any tea in here. For me, this is a sharp jasmine that is covered with many powdery layers and really overpowered with a very sharp musk. And I think the reason I did not like this fragrance is not so much that synthetic powder, but more the sharpness of musk that really cuts through. And that's a kind of musk that itches my nose. The perfume that is also a good representation of a synthetic powdery iris. This is a Japanese brand called Masaki Matsushima. And I used to have one of their perfumes that was called Blanc back at the beginning of 2000s, and it was one of my favorites. This one is called Shiro. If you translate it from Japanese, it also means white. And the name of the perfume really matches. Shiro is that synthetic powder. And if you look at the pyramid, once again, we have that iris in the center. But it's a little bit more complicated with some floral touch. It's not a typical rose, it's also a synthetic kind of rose, very light, otherwise it would disturb me. Here the rose does not disturb me. And it was not the first impression that made me like this perfume. It is the way it settled on my skin. That powderiness, still synthetic, became very soft, cocooning in a way, and that floral touch blended very well within my natural smell. At the end, it was very delicate, feminine, and it made me feel very feminine. And unlike Kenzo, Masaki Matsushima makes their masks softer. If I had to name this fragrance based on the way I feel it, I would name it Cotton Flower. It really is soft and cozy. And the great thing is about this perfume is that it's really cheap. It's probably the cheapest fragrance in my video. But synthetic powder is probably my least favorite type of iris. I just wanted to include it into this video so you are aware that very often you see iris in the pyramid, but what's hiding behind it is just synthetic powder. You can find many powdery perfumes in the collection by Celine. Celine is a brand that is not so much known in the perfume world, but this collection came out recently with several fragrances, and many of them have iris as a note. We're dealing mostly with a powder that smells more like cosmetics. And the fragrance that is probably the most popular one is called La Peau Nue. The name is actually misleading because you might think it's a skin fragrance, but in fact it's a synthetic powder fragrance. It smells like a boudoir, like a powder room of a Venetian courtesan that has the most recent cosmetics from all over the world. So this powder cosmetics, they give this wonderful aura in that boudoir that is very sexy, like a woman waiting for her lover. Some people might also associate it with the French Parisian chic, which would not be false. And overall, it's quite a big like for me, I would say. La Peau Nue is kind of similar to Shiro by Masaki Matsushima. Both of them have roses in their composition, but the kind of roses that I don't hate, which is very rare for me. And both of them, they have very strong powdery element. More like a synthetic, cosmetic kind of powder. I would not say that they are dupes, but they are very similar in style, very different in prices, pay attention. At the beginning, I like La Peau Nue much more, but I start liking it less towards the dry down. When it comes to Shiro, it's actually the opposite. I don't like it so much at the beginning, but I really love it later. Especially if I put water on my skin, I really love how it makes my skin smell, and that lasts very long. La Peau Nue by Celine was designed as unisex, but I would say it's more of a feminine kind of powder. It's a powder that is more associated with cosmetics. If you want something truly unisex, I would say that the perfect fragrance for you would be Hyper Iris by the brand called Courage. This is a relatively recent fragrance. I personally not a big fan because it really is a synthetic powder. Does not give too much room for imagination. It's a kind of abstract powder that would suit both ladies and gentlemen. But if you are a big lover of powdery fragrance without too much of other interferences, this would be the one. My favorite powdery iris is coming from the brand called Boucheron. This collection, honestly, is quite underrated. I think I like every fragrance in this collection. And iris here is definitely a very unique powdery iris. It's probably among my favorite irises, in fact, and I'm actually thinking to buy a full bottle of this because this scent is a really unique beauty. This is more of a floral type of iris with a strong powdery element. And the secret here actually is not the floral part that is a collection of different flowers, but that beautiful powder that has more of an oriental touch. Overall, I cannot say that I'm a fan of oriental fragrances, but somehow this clean floral bouquet with an oriental powdery iris works so beautifully on my skin. That powdery element itself is so complex. It is really reminiscent of iris. It also has that earthiness that is reminiscent of a smell of baking flour and hay that I find in the natural orris butter. And overall, it's just so beautifully balanced. I really enjoy the level of its intensity. I like its projection. It lasts long enough for me to love this fragrance. And the price, honestly, is so attractive. The next category of iris fragrances is probably my favorite. And these are the perfumes that imitate the actual iris flower. Iris flower is a very tricky one. You cannot create essential oils, you cannot collect iris petals for processing. So when it comes to the task of creating the scent of actual iris flower, this is a really challenging one. My standards for this category was set up really high. Because once upon a time I had Iris Pallida, that purple iris with yellow heart, blooming in my garden, and I was smelling it several times a day. I noticed that the best time to smell it was in the morning when it was a bit fresh. That's the time when iris has that gorgeous floral, slightly green, not so much sweet, but mostly very dewy. And this is how I see my iris fragrances in this category. And I'm gonna start with a fragrance that comes from Hermès, from the collection Hermissance. I really like the collection and I have several fragrances. They all come in little bags and travel size sprays of 15 milliliters. And this one is called Iris Ukiyo-e. I'm not sure about my pronunciation, but this irisy fragrance is very unique. I cannot say that this is very close to my real-life experience of iris flowers, but this is certainly a unique fragrance that could be appreciated by those who like florals without too much sweetness, without any sugar and vanilla, slightly green, transparent and dewy. Iris Ukiyo-e does have all these qualities, but the floral blend is something unusual. I've had this fragrance for a month already and I sprayed it a few times and each time my opinion was changing. Some days I liked it, some days I did not like it. There were hours and occasions where I did enjoy it, but at the end I decided to sell it. The reason I was confused about this perfume is because I don't really see it as an iris perfume. The way I can explain it to you is when you cooking, you take one ingredient and you take a second ingredient, and when you blend them in together, you don't feel them separately anymore, but you feel something completely different. And this is the case with this perfume. If you look at the pyramid, we have iris, orange blossom, mandarin, and rose. The perfume does not smell like any of these four. It smells like something totally different, some kind of flower that does not even exist. The style of this perfume is very close to Narcotic Venus by Naso Amato. Some people say that Narcotic Venus of Naso Amato is slightly indolic, which I don't really agree because to me it's an imitation of her actual tuberose with not so many interferences. But it's a tuberose that has more green qualities into it rather than sweetness. The same here. If you are a fan of Narcotic Venus, I think you will appreciate this fragrance as well. They are very similar in style, despite that the notes are really different. One of my favorite irises in the category Floral Imitations is by Chloe, Atelier de Fleurs Iris. And here we are dealing with a monoflower fragrance, but it actually is much more complex. The perfumer puts only iris in the pyramid, but I will tell you that there are some green notes in here. It smells a bit like flower stamps. There is a kind of a green milkiness that it's kind of hard to describe, but overall it's such a beautiful harmony. The fragrance doesn't really smell too close to the iris flower, but nonetheless it's a fragrance I really love. It's a fragrance I use a lot, especially in the summertime. It's a beautiful creation for a very low price. It does not have orris butter, but Chloe claims that this is a natural spray, which is also great for those who like avoiding chemical perfumes. It's just so easy, breezy, and so likable. The iris fragrance that is very unusual, and it's probably one of my best finds of iris fragrances, is by the brand called ID Parfums. It is not known at all. It is not advertised. Honestly, I don't even know how this brand is making their sales. ID stands for Isabelle Derouanier, the perfumer who is also a traveler. Her name is here on the bottle. And the fragrance is called Ame Toscane Reflet d'Erie. Ame Toscane was another perfume that was popular at the beginning of 2000s. This one is the iris version of it. And the bottle itself is a piece of art. I just have a miniature here, but even the miniature is a very beautiful bottle. The perfume has a lot of notes, but in fact it's a very linear imitation of iris flower. On the box it says that it's slightly powdered skin. Yes, there is a powdery element in here, but I did not put it in the category of powdery irises because it's a different kind of powder. This powder is really a powder that is more reminiscent of the actual iris flower, and it is very, very delicate. When you smell it like this, it smells like it has a lot of alcohol, but when alcohol settles on your skin, the fragrance creates something totally magical and very poetic. In fact, I was so much inspired by this fragrance. This perfume made me think of a very dark night with a sky that is like very dark blue, almost black, and with the moon that projects this light that is kind of purple yet cold. And this is a kind of light that I associate with this fragrance. I know that there is already a fragrance out there that is called Tears from the Moon. Actually, it's not even an iris fragrance, but this is the name that this perfume deserves. Another association that I have with it is frosting on the iris flower. Just that's how it smells. Using natural orris butter is a very old thing, but imitating the smell of natural orris is a relatively new trend. And it has only been maybe a decade that we started finding fragrances with the name orris in their title. And one of such fragrances that has become very popular is by a French perfume house called Parle-moi de Parfums. Talk to me about perfumes. And the name of the fragrance is Orris Tattoo. I really doubt that there is natural orris butter in this fragrance, but nonetheless, I think they did a really good job imitating different sides of iris and orris together. There is a pretty strong floral part where I would say that it's a mix of rose and iris, mostly on the iris side because I don't feel rose so much. And then there is a side of this fragrance that makes it actually interesting, and that's the side that gives the name to the fragrance, Tattoo, Orris Tattoo. But I think this side actually comes from the modern amber that they use. I find this amber in other creations of the brand, and it sounds like a crushed glass, papyrus, paper, and that's where we find that note of ink. I think it does have that inky smell a little bit. That's where this floral and orris part meets the inky amber, and that's how this creation is made. Another fragrance that probably imitates orris in a very interesting manner is by Marie-Jeanne called Iris Pallida. I selected this because I really had high hopes for the brand because they are known for using essential oils from grass. The beginning is absolutely matching the description on Fragrantica. We have hazelnuts and iris. And if you've tried other hazelnut fragrances, you probably noticed that they make hazelnuts sweet. This is not the case. This is like a hazelnut dust with absolutely no sweetness, and mixed with iris, again with no sweetness, no vanilla. 5 minutes later, I start realizing that these notes are very much suppressed. Roxane and this ambery base is so strong that it just begins killing iris and all the other notes, including even patchouli. If we step away from the pyramid, I would say that Iris Pallida smells a bit like crushed glass. And in a way, in its style and its behavior, it really reminds me of Musk Moschus by Rainier J. The pyramids are quite different, but they have this feeling that I associate with the itchy sweater. This is just my intuitive feeling about this association that I have. It's like the molecules of this fragrance are triangular. Another fragrance where iris note is going hand in hand with the note of ink is coming from the collection Le Vestiaire de Parfums by Yves Saint Laurent. And I think it's one of their highest rated fragrances. It's called Muse. Here we have ink and ambrette creating that powdery earthiness of orris root, and I like it as a concept. The only part that I don't like here so much is that sweetness that honestly is not even a sweetness of vanilla as it is described in the pyramid. So that sweetness just kind of covers up and eats that inky part, and then the modern amber starts dominating. So I really like this fragrance probably for 15-30 minutes after spraying, and then it just fades away in a way that I don't really like. The fragrance that is probably among my favorite iris fragrances is called Iris Torréfiée by Guerlain. Torréfiée is a term that is usually used for coffee beans. It literally is translated as grilled, but coffee beans, they are not grilled in a sense of grilling. They put them on hot charcoals to make this humidity and aromas of vegetal coffee beans come out. And I think this is a kind of coffee that we're supposed to find in here. Because surely you will not find that coffee of grilled beans that you're getting in a coffee shop. So don't expect much from a coffee note in here. Iris Torréfiée is probably among the most complex fragrances. Every time I use it, I catch something different in here. I put it in the category of orris butter imitations because it has a very interesting way of imitating orris butter. But it's not just orris butter. When you smell it just like this, and this is how sillage is supposed to smell like, it smells mostly floral, and that's the moment when you catch that leather. Because when you wear the fragrance, you will be searching for that leather and you won't really find it. You will find it very thin in the sillage of this fragrance. And the way to detect it is by just smelling a bottle. So the kind of leather that we're getting in here is very transparent. That's why we see also tea in the base of the pyramid. It's a kind of leather that you can find in some Bottega Veneta fragrances or in Calèche by Hermès. It's not a real leather note that you might be expecting in here. The note that describes this orris butter in here, and you will get it probably after 2 minutes of spraying the fragrance, is something that I associate with chalk. It's like a chalk with a bit of black earth. This is a very good way to imitate orris butter. And then ambrette seeds, which is a vegetal musk, also adds that vegetal character to this orris butter. At the end, we do have that beautiful orris butter. The thing is, it's only a part of the composition. Then we have this floral part, and the iris we get in here is mostly lipstick iris. And what makes me love this fragrance is that the two parts, they marry each other perfectly, creating this beautiful multi-dimensional composition. One myth that is out there is the two different packages of Iris Torréfiée have different formulas. I don't know about the chemical composition of the two, but in terms of smell, they actually smell identical to me. Well, I think it's time to finish the first part about Iris fragrances. I definitely will do the second part because Iris is one of my favorite notes. I always keep discovering more and more Iris fragrances. And if you have some fragrances that you would like to see in the next video, or if you'd like to share your favorites, please comment below.